This review has been made possible by Toyota of Naperville. As you know, Toyota has tons of brand new Toyotas available for purchase. But did you know that they also have a remarkable selection of used cars? Head on over to toyotaofnaperville.com and look through hundreds of used cars for sale right now.
Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 2003 Chevy Corvette. Up front is a 5.7 liter V8 and down below is a 4-speed automatic transmission. If you'd like to read more of my thoughts, head on over to carmarshal.com/overdrive. But let's get back to that 5.7 liter V8. Well, this is a pretty common Chevy engine. We've dealt with it before. And it's a pretty well worked through engine, nothing really too crazy, and I like the power numbers a lot. Oh man, that wasn't even full throttle. I don't want to push this car too much because it hasn't been driven in a little bit, but the automatic does not kill the power of that V8. You really do feel it. It feels great. And I have to say, it still packs a hefty punch, even with the automatic. Now, like I said, paired to it is a 4-speed automatic transmission. This might be where some people might not like the review because this is an automatic Corvette. And actually the first automatic Corvette I've ever driven. But I have driven a manual Corvette of the same body style with the same engine, so I actually can touch on that. So let's first talk about the automatic. It shifts. It's a kind of sloppy automatic from the late 90s, really. It's nothing too impressive. It's not horrible by any means. I'm not mad about it. I'm not frustrated with it. But obviously, as a driver's car, I would much rather have a manual transmission. But speaking of that, my good friend Max actually has a C5 Corvette in manual. And so I haven't driven it extensively, but I have driven it around a parking lot. So I've gotten it in and out of gear. And what I can say is that the clutch is decently heavy, not super heavy, but decently heavy. And the throw is really heavy. Getting it into gear, you kind of muscle it. And a lot of people like that. Personally, I'm used to a car that I could toss into gear with one finger, so it felt heavier to me. But overall, it's not a heavy throw. It's very manly and very masculine. And that being said, it doesn't feel sloppy. You know, the Mustang Shelby GT500, that had a really heavy throw, and that felt sloppy. It felt like I took a broomstick and shoved it into a bucket of gravel. That's not the case with the C5. The C5 feels heavy, but it feels proper. And last but not least about the drivetrain is that the Corvette is, of course, rear-wheel drive. So let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have a bunch of little gauges. On the left is my tachometer. On the right is my speedometer. Then on my far left, I have oil pressure and temperature. And then on the far right, I have fuel and battery voltage. To the left, I actually have controls for a heads-up display. That's right, the Corvette actually has a heads-up display that you can adjust the brightness, what you want to see, and stuff like that. Really cool that it has that, especially for 2003. And then on the right, I have a bunch of different stuff. Fuel, gauges, trip, options, E/M, and reset. That is what is going to be displayed on that bottom screen right below the actual gauges. There's a little digital readout, and that's what it's telling me there. The steering wheel has no buttons. It is a very blank, normal steering wheel. To the left of the steering wheel, I do have a trunk release button as well as my fog lights button. And then we get to the door. Now the door obviously has window switches. They are auto down, but not auto back up. Door locks, mirrors, and memory seats, which is super nice. But the weird thing about this is that they feel really weird. The window switches, all the buttons, they feel like you're putting a pin into an ATM and not like window switches. They feel like actual like buttons. It's almost hard to describe. It feels like the volume adjustment buttons on your phone when you have a case on it, one of those rubbery cases. It's really weird, and I'm not sure why Chevy did this, but they did. To the right, I have a giant heating and cooling vent, and then I have the stock factory radio, which interestingly says theft lock on the upper right-hand corner. So I guess it's some thief deterrent. But this is the factory 2003 radio. We have a CD player, we have our presets, tune scan, and we do have like fade, balance, auto tune, stuff like that. It's a real 2000s radio, but it's not bad. Now down below that, we do get climate controls, and the only interesting thing really that I found here is that I do actually have dual climate zones. For 2003 and for a Corvette, you wouldn't pick a sports car to have dual climate zones, but this Corvette does. Then I get a little cubby hole and a flip out cup holder. This is not going to hold any cup of any significant size, but you know, I guess you have one. Then we get to the shifter. The shifter looks kind of wonky. It looks straight out of the 90s. It has the giant button on top to shift which gear you want it to go into. It's fine. I mean, it is what it is. I don't really like this shifter. It feels very arcade-y, but what can you do? It's an automatic. Down below the shifter, we have active handling. This is traction control, essentially, which I love the fact that they put a C5 Corvette on the actual button. I think that's a really nice touch. And actually, when they switched generations to the C6 Corvette, they actually never switched the button. So the C6 Corvettes still get a little picture of a C5 for their traction control, which I think is really, really funny. Then I get a center console. Now the seats are decently comfortable. They're not the most aggressive. I'm pretty comfortable in them, and they don't hold you all that well. Although, I don't know if something was applied to these seats or if this is just how the seats are. I slide in and out of them so easily. It's the actual like vinyl or leather or whatever these seats are made out of. I slide super, super easy. And granted, this car only has 21,000 miles, so I guess you could chalk it up to, you know, maybe they're just really well-maintained seats. But there is no back seat to review, but there is one last thing about the Corvette, the C5 Corvette specifically, that is really, really neat. And that is the Targa top. So you might be noticing in the in-car video right now that the roof is a giant sunroof. Well, on the outside, it doesn't look like a giant sunroof. And actually, that whole center part, this whole thing, can actually be removed. The whole thing, sides and everything. So you actually get an open top experience. Once you do take that top off, there is a spot behind me where you can stow the Targa top when you're not using it, when it's out, when it's in convertible mode. Although they still did make a convertible Corvette C5, this is not the convertible, this is the Targa top. So they made a hard top, a Targa top, and a convertible, all three separate roof options. Now we gotta talk about the looks. I'm not a huge fan of the look of this generation of Corvette. They have started to grow on me, mainly because my good friend Max has one. And really, the more time you spend with something, the more attractive it becomes to you. And so I think it's more of an association sort of like, rather than I actually think the styling is good. That being said, it's not a bad looking car. I don't think it's ugly. I don't think it's horrendous. I just always think that it looks like a Hot Wheels car. I always will think that Corvettes just look like Hot Wheels that have been wished to life by a 10-year-old. Oh, and how could one forget pop-up headlights? This C5 was one of the last cars to have pop-up headlights before pedestrian safety laws crushed them all. We finally have pop-up headlights. In 2003, we had pop-up headlights. Oh, how I miss them. I miss them. I miss them. Well, the last thing I'll say about the Corvette before we wrap up this review is that if you ever wanted to know what GM was like, GM, the people who make Chevy, if you've ever wanted to know what they were like in a certain era, just look at their Corvette. This is so reflective of the late 90s and early 2000s. I have all gray plastics in here with the green electronics. The shifter is very late 90s. Everything in here is super, super late 90s, early 2000s, that sort of era. And so on the channel, I'll leave a link at the end, but on the channel I have driven a C6 Z06 Corvette as well as a C7 Corvette. And they are all the exact same way in the fact that they very well reflect the era in which they came out of. The C6 Corvette shares a lot of parts with my 2007 G6. The electronics got updated. It feels more updated. It feels newer, but obviously was made when Chevy was struggling a little bit. And then the C7 has all of that loaded technology. GM really stepped up their game around 2012, 2013, right when the C7 was coming out. And so it's obvious there that they've stepped up their game. And so if you've ever wanted to know what Chevy was like at any point in time, just look at their Corvette. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I want to give a huge thank you to Toyota of Naperville for letting me take out their used 2003 Chevy Corvette. This will be available on their website. Huge thank you to them. If you guys are interested in this Corvette, I'll leave a link down below in the description. Awesome customer service. If you don't want a Corvette, but you're looking at other used cars, they have literally hundreds of used cars on their lot at all times. So definitely go give them a look. That is Toyota of Naperville. Their information is up on the screen. But hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.
There goes a sight from my soul.